Good afternoon, everybody. We're just going to wait just a moment as people are coming in, and then we'll get started. Okay, let's get started. Thank you very much for joining us today for our monthly UF Innovate Pathways Insights seminar. My name is Anita Rao, and I'm the Program Director of UF Innovate Pathways, one of the 4 units of UF Innovate, launched to increase our training and support programs for innovators. The topic of today's seminar is developing an innovative idea into a product. We are pleased to have with us today John Engels as our speaker. John is no stranger to us. John is a successful entrepreneur and investor who has started several companies based on academic research. He has worked with UF and faculty innovators here for over 20 years, spun out 2 companies and taken products to market that have changed people's lives. John started out with a dream to start a medical device company and help people. That led him to license a UF technology and start the company Oxygen with Jamie Grooms. Oxygen grew from being a small local startup to $1 billion NASDAQ listed company that generates more than $100 million in revenues annually. John is currently the CEO of Core Matrix and a co-founder of Andante Biologics. In this seminar, he will provide his insights on early stage technology development and how to take a great idea and make it into a company that develops products that impact society. Before I turn it over to John, I just wanted to remind people this presentation is being recorded. Please put your questions into chat if you have questions, and feel free to ask questions at he will answer them. Some of them as he go along, and some of them he'll respond to at the end. So John, take it away.
Thank you so much, Anita. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
And then do you see the slides moving okay?
Yes.
They were moving? Okay, great. So thank you, Anita. Thanks for that great introduction. We are going to have to be in our best behavior since this is recorded. So my topic is developing an idea or a technology into a product. And I want to have fun with this. So I call this the 10 thys. As some of the stuff you have heard before, none of it is new. As one of my first bosses and a great entrepreneur said, the art, as Picasso said, the art is knowing what to steal. So steal away and maybe pick and choose as you do so. So the 10 thys. So you may have a good idea for what you want to do. You may have a technology that you've developed, and they can be very, very diverse. The advice I'm going to try to give today, or my experience that I would like to share today, is reflective of many different technologies. I've been around a bunch. So I'm going to try to provide some thoughts about what to do with any one of them. And
John,
yes.
Can I just interrupt you for a moment? They're saying that the slides are not changing. So
okay. Yeah, that does happen. Let me try this again. All righty. Just a sec. Okay. Okay, I'm going to put this into presentation mode. Sorry, bear with me just a sec. Okay, now you should be able to see it move in just a sec. Okay, there we go.
Looking good.
All right, thank you. Sorry about that. So where was I? So you may have many different technologies that you're looking at, and I'm trying to provide advice and experience that would apply to many. So some things that you may be familiar with or have seen, you've got some kind of new manufacturing system to develop an antibody. You're looking at ways to do AI, right? You have a therapy for an immune disorder, or you have a new vaccine or technology. How do we link all these together, and how do we begin? What I'd like to try to do is, again, be playful with this and help you think about how to start, and then how to guide this early stage of development through a series of questions or statements that are meant to be provocative. So if you find yourself provoked, please share a question, and I'll do my best to get to it. I'm going to also share experience from 3 companies, Core Matrix, Axogen, and Andante Biologics, and maybe share some insights from a company I was on the board of, a big robotic company called MMI, and a company I invested in called HCW Biologics. Before I do all that, I wanted to kind of go the other direction. While we all love technology, and that's why we're here, and this presentation is kind of geared to the tech startup, really, it's never about the technology. It's always about the people. And I got this from my grandpa, a wonderful man who never went to college. He never went to graduate school, of course, because of that, but he ended up running an electric utility that started out as a little tiny company that became a Fortune 500 company. And I remember once he was retired, I'm playing cards with him as a little kid, and he gets a call from the technician. And the technician asked him all these technical questions long after he was retired about this or that line and this or that technical aspect of the utility. And my grandpa answered him in detail. And I said, "Grandpa, how do you do that?" And he said, "Well, I remember every person who built that line, and I remember everything about it." And so that's what I mean. He remembered the people that were involved, and that's how he managed technology. It was always about the people. You could never get to a restaurant with him, right? Because he'd always be stopping and talking to, asking how this person's child was and naming that child. And he was a wonderful man that way. And he led through his experience with people, and he led by his experience with his team there. And they built a very successful, a whole group of people did there, a very successful company. So I'd like you to think about the first die, know thyself. So when you're starting this venture, there's so many places you can go, and everyone's going to tell you different things about what you should do with this technology. The answer is you should do what you want with this technology, because you are the fire and the fuel that's going to make this techie thing come to life, right? You are the person, and your team are the people that will make it work. So if you're going to do all this work, and it is a lot of work, it better be satisfying some pretty big itches that you have. What is your dream? So I went through this experience when I was first moving to Gainesville. My wife had proposed. I was moving from Silicon Valley. She said, probably we should be living in the same city together if we're going to do this. And I had lots of time to think as I drove. And so I sat down and wrote out three rules about what I was looking for in my next venture, my dream. And so I wanted to help people. I knew that. And I thought about that one and kind of threw some rules in about that. I was looking for a technology that was simple. There were so many complicated things in Silicon Valley that no one could explain, and it turned out nobody understood them, and they didn't succeed. So I wanted something that was simple and true, that anybody could understand, even me. And I wanted it to be worth, call this the Matthew Natecki principle. He's my biology professor at Chicago. I wanted it to be worth 5 to 10 years of my life. He had said, choose a project that's worth a lifetime. And I simplified that a little bit. I couldn't quite say lifetime, but I said 5 to 10 years of my life. And I think that's a really good guide. If you find something that's worth 5 to 10 years of your life, even if it failed, what a good metric that is. So I had kind of the metrics that I was using to gauge which technology I would like to develop and why. And then I kind of added somewhere around Texas, I added this corollary 3.5. I said, all right, let me find a team of diverse people. It'd be great to work with the gray-haired NASDAQ CEO who's been there and done that as part of the team. So that was kind of what I was looking for when I first arrived in Gainesville. And it's funny, right? As soon as you can define what it is you're looking for, you seem to find it. So I ended up finding the technology that became Axygen. It fit all these rules really nicely. And it was a very good start to a company. So I'd say the second thing in knowing thyself is you guys have all gone through personality things. You're trying to figure out what you're all about, what's unique about you. Just like to share one that is particularly oriented to teams and to small companies and to innovation. And that's just one called social styles. So this helps you vis-a-vis and relative to your team members. And it says, how do you appear to your team? It asks your team, the people that you manage, the people you're co-managing with, and the people that manage you, to answer a series of questions about how they perceive you. Just simple subjective things like fast, deliberative, a thinker, a doer, so on. It goes on 300 words, all of them not good or bad in and of themselves. And you get a yes or no from all of your team members on this. And you end up doing it to yourself too. And the learning really comes from how you see yourself and how it's different from how others see you. And so you get a lot of insight into how others see you. And if you see yourself differently, what can you work on? But then it also kind of helps you think about a rough category of where your particular skills may lie vis-a-vis others. So if you're a classic kind of drill sergeant type, you might be a driver in this model. And so you know that in a meeting, you want to have an answer now. If you're an analytical type, actually, you want the answer to be perfect. If you're an amiable person, you might make sure that you understand everyone in the room is comfortable, is collaborating, is doing so in an ethical way. If you're an expressive person, you just want to talk and make sure that you've been heard and you hear others. Anyway, these different ways of appearing and applying your skills end up giving you insights when you're sitting in that meeting as to the different things other people are trying to accomplish. You see different types prevalent in different institutions, and some institutions are run by drivers, others by analytical types, and so on, others by sales folks who are usually expressive folks. So this was a good way to think about my own skills relative to those around me and how I communicate those skills, or how I communicate myself in achieving goals vis-a-vis others. And then lastly, I really want to call out, know your weaknesses and call them out to your team members and be really open and honest about that. Why? Everyone already knows what your weaknesses are. You're the only one who thinks that they don't know, right? If you think that. So you might as well share them. You might as well be open and honest about what you can do, what you can't do, and get folks around you that can help you with those weaknesses. And what you do is you kind of come up with a compact. Let's say that you're an analytical type who wants perfection, right? And you're not going to leave that meeting until you think you have a good plan to do so. Well, sometimes that's going to mean that you get bogged down in details and you don't move fast. So you might want to pair up with someone who's a driver, right? And so you're going to find someone who has a really different strategic maybe mindset. And you're going to agree with that person. Hey, look, we're going to come to terms. We have really different ways of thinking. But if you and I can come to terms on some way to work with each other, you can help me with my weakness and I can help you with yours, and we can be a better team. I think that's really the heart of what it is to know thyself. It's really knowing thyself relative to your team. So that then kind of leads to the next one. Know your team. I'm going to provide you an example of this in just a sec. So what is your team? Your team starts, any company can have this, right? And you might think, well, I've got a technology, I've got one person, or I've got 3 of us that we're wanting to do this. Is that really a team? Yes, it is. In fact, you can put all kinds of formal structures around your team, and I really encourage you to do so, because the more you do that, the more you look like what you want to become, right? So you've got your dream. Now you have your dream relative to other people on your team. And you'll start with the leadership team. This is the group of people that you guys have signed up to make your dream a reality. These are the things, you don't share secrets from this leadership team. It could be 2 people, again, could be 5 people, but usually it's a small number of people. And your job in the leadership team is to navigate, right? You're always collecting feedback. Let's start with your customer. Your customer has a lot to say about how you're going to develop your company. In fact, they're the whole reason you exist, right? You're going to bring a solution to them. So when you're first forming this company, welcome them to your team. Welcome them to your discussions, because they will frame those discussions in ways you never thought of. So they are part of your team. You're going to then, look outside and say, okay, I like some advice to how to do this. You're going to put together a group of advisors. Let's go to the left side there. That's kind of your external strategy group. You're going to find people who are experts, right? Who've been there and done that. They may know way more about you, about the domain that you're trying to be an expert in. And so you bring them in as an advisor. I suggest you do it in a formal way and you structure the discussion with them. But whatever you do, make sure that you do it, right? So you put someone that you kind of want to emulate, a domain expert, maybe a CEO who's been there and done that. And their job is to come in and kind of beam in every 6 months or so, or maybe every 3 months, on some major problems that you're experiencing or solutions you want to think about. And they're supposed to sit there and help you get around those things. And then they go off to their own lives. So they're bringing their outside experience, and you do that once in a while. And that you bring that to your board. Again, any company can have a board of directors. Every company should. What does a board of directors do? It sets strategy. It hires the team, right? Or monitors the team after it's been hired. It does that by agreeing on what the strategy should be, measuring milestones to that strategy, and then reviewing the performance. So that's the board of directors. So this is always an interaction. You as a leadership team are helping your board and your advisors help you come up with your strategy, which you then share with the team. You're interacting with the team as you're making that, and you share with your customers and you iterate. It's really important to do this and to recognize that you have a team. And why do you recognize that? Because the team is your cavalry, right? We always have a tendency to think when we're starting a company that someone else is going to ride over the horizon and save us when we have some big crisis. And you know what? The cavalry is here and you are it, right? So each of you comes with your dream. Each of you understands your weaknesses and strengths. You're working together to devise what this common group team dream is, because you're going to have so many challenges. You've got to be banded together and you got to be on the same page. So what I think you do as kind of a work product, when you kind of initially have yourself figured out what you want to do and you got your team figured out, is you want to sit down and come up with, well, what is your collective dream? That's sort of like, what is your strategy, right? The best description of strategy I've ever heard is one by Erica Anderson, and I'll share her book with you in just a second. So she says, being strategic means consistently making those core directional choices that will best move you to your hoped for future. So best move you to your hoped for future. It seems kind of loose, right? But when you think about it, this is, for me at least, the perfect description of strategy. What are the core directional choices that we can kind of agree on today that will move us to our city on the hill tomorrow? So Erica's book is highlighted here. So it's called Being Strategic. She's a wonderful woman. We visited with her every 6 months when we started Oxygen, right? We did this over and over. We did this for 15 years while I was there. Every 6 months, we'd revisit strategy, think about our strategic imperatives and our tactics, right? And we would do this as a group, and the group got bigger and bigger and bigger. It was a lot of fun. That's how we stayed on the same page. That's how we made sure the vision that started really small continued to include everyone, right? It was these strategy sessions. And part of that process is you come up with your 5-year plan. This can take many different forms. It can be a business plan. It can be a PowerPoint. It can be a detailed Excel model. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. Maybe it should be all those things. But what's important about them is you come up with the key strategic imperatives to how you make that city, you reach that city on the hill. So at Oxygen, this was, this nerve regeneration company that, and we came up with all kinds of headlines for what that city on the hill would look like when we got there. We'd have helped 10,000 people. We'd be in the Wall Street Journal. We would be voted one of the best companies to work for. We'd be on NASDAQ and so on and so forth. We had all these headlines for how we would know we'd arrived at our city on the hill when we made this nerve regeneration company happen. And we revisited those headlines a lot. So you got your city on the hill, and then you kind of draw a trail back, right? There's going to be a kind of a path that gets you there, and you're going to start way down on the valley. And that's what your plan is, right? And so you're coming up with the strategic plan with your strategic imperatives for this year, and you break those into tactics, and then you further break those into an operating plan that goes into a budget. And I recommend really drilling down to on the quarterly level, agreeing on what you're going to accomplish, right? So every quarter, here's what I'm going to accomplish. And then that's something that you can review with the board that you've set up, and you make sure that you're on track. That's strategy, right? And then part of this process early on, right? This is something that probably once you have it figured out, you don't change it much, but you're really thinking about the business model. So in your annual operating plan for your strategy, you're thinking about a business model. And on the most simple level, this is, what resources do I need? What process do I use those resources in to answer and create a value proposition for my customer that ends up making me a profitable enterprise or a sustainable enterprise if you're not a for-profit company. And so a lot of those things you see on the left here go into that. I could do a whole session just on this, but I wanted to stay high level, so I'll keep moving. And I just realized that know that thy plan will change, right? No stone, anything that's set in stone is going to break, right? So you want to make sure that while you're not regularly throwing your strategy out the window, right? Equally, you're not saying, well, this is it, no matter what, come hell or high water, no matter what happens in the market or what happens on my team or to my technology, I'm going to stick with it. No, you're adjusting all the time. And that's what that process of feedback is, right? You're listening to your customers, to your team, and to your board and your advisors as to what is the best path. But hopefully, if you get it right, and generally good strategy, you don't change these a lot, right? Then the tactics themselves, the detailed plan is what you change. Or if you've accomplished it, you clap each other on the back and you celebrate your successes. So here's some examples. Every company could be kind of broken into functional areas. I did this for Core Matrix. I broke it into kind of medical device functional areas and broke them into 10. And I wanted to make sure that our strategic imperatives were kind of broken into a quarterly action plan. And then we broke that up by department. Now, some of us owned a couple different departments. We're not a big company right now. But here's an example, like on the regulatory and quality side, we came up with some goals. We said, okay, we're going to, and this is just generic, so I won't get into the details of Core Matrix, but let's say we came up with a regulatory path, a regulatory strategy, and then at the end of the year, we're going to have an FDA meeting. That's simple to measure, right? Do we do that or not? And but I do encourage that you measure and monitor those things. Same with, say, a biz development project. You come up with a partner that you want to partner with. You come up with an agreement. Maybe you'd out-license some IP, or maybe you'd in-license some, and you can measure all those things. At the end of the year, sometimes you say, well, I didn't come close to achieving any of these. Well, it's still important to review them, because you realize, well, what was I wrong about, and what could I change, and how could I improve my planning for the future? That's what the process is. Always iterative. So here's the Core Matrix example. So I think we have a really nice strategy now where it's really simple. Everyone can understand it. Basically, we're a regenerative heart company, and we have a regenerative matrix that heals the heart. So you have disease or dysfunction in the heart. This will rebuild that diseased or damaged tissue in the heart, and you're basically left with a nice, healthy heart afterwards. And we show a picture of a baby on the cover, because this was kind of invented by, this approach for our lead product was invented by pediatric surgeons. So here's our tech, right? Our tech is basically really, really simple. It's an extracellular matrix that regenerates tissue. It does this in many places. At Oxygen, we used some of this for nerve repair. But at Core Matrix, we use it for cardiovascular applications. And the basic principle is it can recellularize and revascularize tissue. So we place it in that tissue and it does so. We're up against a major competitor, a bioprosthetic. On the tech level, we crush this thing, our competitor. So they're made out of a cross-linked, glutaraldehyde cross-linked bioprosthetic material, bovine or porcine. And in fact, they try to make it more durable by cross-linking it. And in fact, that means that it will likely calcify over time. So eventually it will fail. So that's what we're up against. We want to have a better regenerative material that heals the heart rather than something that pushes the problem down the road. So that's kind of our basic tech. When I came in the company as CEO about 18 months ago, we could apply this tech in many ways. We had 11 different product ideas, if you can believe it. Many major companies don't have this many great, and all of these were great. They got me so excited. But it's very hard to execute on 11 product ideas, no matter if you're a big company or a small. So this just seemed like a really big stretch for us as a company. But every one of these had one member of our team or our board completely sold, right? So I was kind of sorting through which of these would be the best. And we had a ton of patents, 150 patents now on all these products. So we had a lot of stuff going for us, but a lot of stuff going. So I kind of sat and thought about, after talking to all the folks, the advisors, the board, the team, our customers, and I said, well, what's super, super clear about what I must do? Well, everyone agrees that we have to do a financing to support all this, right? So that seems to be strategic imperative number one. We can all agree on that. And then we want to find a financing round, not just any money, but we want to do that at a valuation that is suitable for us. So we had kind of two choices in front of us. We could either do that by appealing to an investor's revenue valuation metrics, or we could do that through a pipeline valuation metrics. You as a company will have these same choices. You might have a small product that's earning some money, not sure what to do with it, because you have this other cool idea that you want to develop. Well, actually, those are diverging paths, right? You have to kind of choose, especially as an early stage company. It's rare that you have resources to do both. If you're asking people to value you based on your revenue, guess what? You better have good revenue, and you better see that revenue grow. So actually, all of your focus and attention is going to go to revenue generation. On the flip side, if you have a really cool pipeline, you're basically selling the idea of future revenue, right? And you want to make sure everyone's crystal clear on what that is. Why would they not just wait till tomorrow if your pipeline's being in development today? Why? Because you're creating urgency for today. Why they should act now to get on board with this plan. And you're doing that by making a really super compelling picture of this pipeline technology you're developing. So that was really, really clear at Core Matrix. What we ended up doing is we said, okay, there's two things this year that we must do. We must raise the money, and then we're going to basically support the product that everyone seemed to agree had the biggest potential, and that was our regenerative valve. We wanted to get that back into its clinical study. It just finished its EFS. We want to get into a pivotal study and begin to get it near approval. And so that became a really crystallizing the first two things that we had to do as a company, and that unified us all. Now, right after that, we didn't have a lot of unity. Everyone had a pet project or a different idea, or some people wanted to go after revenue. But we said, at that first board meeting where we nailed down this strategy, look, if we try to do everything, we'll do nothing. We can agree that these first two things are the most important things we'll do as a company. So anything that derails those things actually hurts us as a company. So we got unanimous buy-in on that notion too. And that means if we can do all these other things that I've listed, the may do things that I've listed here, we will do them, right? But until we know we can accomplish the first two, we won't do any of them. So that's a really important discipline as a company. It's almost as important to know what you will not do, or what you may do, as what you will do, because you want to make sure that you can accomplish the most important things in the company. So we did that. We laid out the strategy. We came up with our kind of quarterly goals. On the fundraising side, we made it kind of fun. We did metrics around how many pitches that we would do and when we would do them and so on. We did the same thing on the study side. We got back into clinical study, got our clinical study started, got people enrolled, a lot of fun, a lot of momentum. We got to celebrate the successes. we all feel really good after this year. And we had fun kind of supporting this process, coming up with some graphics like this one that you see here, coming up with a cool video that shows our cool core technology, this regenerative heart valve in operation in a way that everyone can understand and is appealing to. We can describe it really well using this in a really simple way. We went on and described our market in a simple way. We talk about this valve almost being like an orphan drug. And then we simplify this for investors. So that's the core matrix example. And if there's, I'm just going to pause there for a second and ask Anita if there's any questions that I should stop with and answer now.
Nothing on chat yet.
Okay, well, please send them in. I don't want to just keep talking, right, guys? So stop me, please. I'm going to move on. So that was a core matrix example. I'm CEO of Core Matrix now. We've raised money. We've got our study going. We got a cool tricuspid valve and pivotal study that will be the first tricuspid valve and the first truly regenerative valve. Talk about a mission, right, that can help people. It gets me fired up every day to think about it. So it really satisfies my dream goals. And that's really, really important because it's not easy, especially in this market environment. Okay, so moving on to the next die, know thy customer.
John, we do have one quick question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, John. Do you leave the disease valve in place and put the new one in, or do you take the old valve out and put the new one in?
You know, you can leave part of the old valve or diseased valve behind. Mostly what people do is remove it. I've got a nice surgical video. If you're interested in seeing it, I can walk you through the pitch deck. But it's kind of cool. So you go ahead and suture this in place along the annulus at the top of the valve, and you suture it to the papillary muscles, in this case, the tricuspid valve. And it reforms into your valve, right? As soon as you come off pump, it works, and it regenerates into the chordae tendineae of the heart. It's really cool. But I don't want to get too bogged down on that because I could talk all day about core matrix, which I do.
Thank you, John.
Yes, thanks. So know thy customer is my next one. And I'm sorry, these are going to be fly-ins. I'm just going to go through all of them. Sorry. And so know thy customer. Who's my customer? Do I have more than one type, right? This seems like an obvious one, but actually it's the most important one that you could do once you've kind of got your tech, your team in place, right? You're constantly thinking now about your customer. So there's a simple graphic there about what your customer could be. Take Axogen, right? We sold a nerve graft and we sold it first to surgeons, but we also had to convince the hospital to buy it, right? So that was another sort of customer channel there. And of course, the end user would have been a patient, right? So we have three really diverse customer types. And the way we got people to adopt it was first focusing on the surgeon, but there were several different surgeon types too. So this can get really complicated really fast, even with a simple product. So keeping your strategy simple pays dividends when you get to these more complicated questions. Again, knowing your customer, being with your customer, asking them questions, challenging them, solving their problems, solving their pain. This is what a business is all about. The more time you can do this, the better. I go to as many of our core matrix implants as I possibly can. And the reason that I do is because I learn something every time I do. A surgeon says something just off the cuff, and it just takes me down a whole new path, right? And that would happen every day at Axogen too for 15 years. So knowing that customer is huge. Know thy product, right? So how does it change your customer? You might think it does, but once you sit with your customer, oh my God, you realize I got a major problem with my product. I got to change it. How do you become the unique provider of that change, right? So you're kind of coming into a situation and there might be three other groups doing it. How do you protect your innovation, your IP, maybe your trade secrets, maybe you have a unique manufacturing process. These are all things you got to think about because once you've done all this for your customer, you want to make sure that you are the unique provider of that change. Think about, can you actually achieve high margins with this product? Something I hear a lot on the academic side is, well, right now someone's selling the product for, let's call it $2,000, and I think I can do it for $300. That's usually wrong. There's actually usually a reason why it's being sold for 2,000. And I don't really even have to know the details of any market to know that's usually the case. So when you start getting into what does it take to run a business, having high margins on your products isn't about being overly greedy or something. No, it's about being realistic about the costs that are involved with bringing something to market. So take again a heart valve. Well, I'll have a distribution team that's going to bring it in. I'll have to manufacture it. There's expense there. I'll have to support it with clinical data, which costs a lot of money. All these things start adding up as a whole front office team. Then each sales rep costs an incredible amount. All these things start adding up and you can't even believe they start eating up what you thought was going to be a really, really good margin. And the reason why you have to do those things is because that's what every company has to do, right? That's what it takes to win. And so having a high margin product is really important. That's the only kind of company that Warren Buffett will invest in. And there's a reason why a sage like him will do that, right? Because you want to have room to be able to deploy resources. So take, for instance, to run a 100-person sales force, right? To sell a product will cost you $50 million a year. Did you ever think that, right? Each one of those guys might cost you $500,000 once you're all said and done. It's extremely expensive to do a lot of this stuff. So that is a big part of why you want to have a margin in your product. How do you store, move, and deliver it? We had a unique problem at Axogen. We had to store one of our products frozen. That became a real logistical challenge. Others were shelf stable, much better. How do I collect revenue on this product? Who pays me for this, right? How do I get paid by them? And then you kind of boil it into, you got your product you're selling to a customer, you kind of know your different customer types. How many of there are there in this market? Easy one was, how many orthopedic surgeons are there in the market that might do this? Well, it didn't get so easy. Turns out we're not focused, if we're Axogen, we're not focused on orthopedic surgeons, we're focused on orthopedic hand surgeons, a harder number to measure.
John, do you have a second for a quick couple of questions?
Yeah, sure. Please.
Okay. How does someone with an idea patent connect someone like you to that can make a company out of a product?
Yeah, I guess, I mean, starting here again, you've got an idea, right? So to kind of reframe, if you came in late, the first thing you're doing here, right, when you have this technology is you want to think about your dream. There's many things you could do with even one technology. If I have a nerve regeneration technology, am I only going to be a nerve company, or am I going to be a company that supports plastic reconstructive surgeons with all kinds of different products? There's many different dreams you could have, right? So you have to be really super crystal clear on yours. You have to do that with your team. So then you're going to do all the kinds of things to protect it. So I think your question was around patents and how do I protect it and how do I turn it into a product? The patents are important. You have to get someone from OTL to help you with that. Get your patent counsel to help you with that if you're outside of the university. And that's expensive and it's just important, it's just part of life. But it's a necessary building block, right? Because it's going to be one of the things that protects your product in this situation. What you want to be the unique provider of your change, and push come to shove way down the line, if someone challenges you, you might be able to stop them with your patent. But actually, there's many other ways that you'd stop them. And usually the patent isn't the way you stop them. That's kind of the thing that gets an investor to say yes. But it's rarely the thing that you have to use to defend your product. You defend yourself and be the unique provider of the change, your technology and your product, by being bigger and faster and being better than your competitor. And you beat them out. You actually don't box them out, right? You beat them out. So at Axogen, we competed against some really big companies and we beat them. We were better. We never had to fight them with our patents, though.
I apologize. There wasn't another question kind of similar. Could you please recommend some general ways to protect IP when presenting pitches to clients or potential clients other than a non-disclosure agreement?
Yeah, non-disclosure is really important. So you want to, before you do that, you want to get someone to even want to spend time on you, right? And that's the battle right now in this market. So many opportunities and so many technology companies that are hurting. You're fighting for someone's time. So you're not going to tell them, I'm not going to tell you anything about my business until you sign these 5 agreements, right? You're going to try to make it really easy for them. And you're going to do that by making a non-confidential deck. And that non-confidential deck helps you share the big picture that gets them excited. And usually what it is you and I might be really excited about our technology. I love talking about ECMs, right? But actually, most people don't need to know anything about my ECM to know something about my company and to know whether or not they want to be interested in my company. So I showed a cartoon video of our heart valve product at Core Matrix. There's nothing proprietary about that, right? It's just a nice picture of what we do. It's about as techie as I find that I need to get, right? Until someone starts asking me technical questions, I actually can stay on the super high level. So your initial pitch is you don't actually talk about the tech. You talk about your solution that you're providing to your customer and why your market is huge. You're talking about these slides.
John, there are a couple of other questions.
Yeah, please.
Sent to me directly. If the team is missing some critical expertise, what is your advice to identifying and securing a team member that provides the missing expertise?
How do you go out and find that team member? Is that the question?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's hard, right? When you have no money and you don't yet know if you have a successful company on your hands. So what do? Well, you convince them, right? You're trying to be an entrepreneur. And the way that you convince them is by having your game plan together. So a lot of the things that I'm talking about here are all the same questions for an employee, as for an investor, as for a customer, and so on. If I can talk about a regenerative heart valve, everybody gets it, right? Everybody knows they'd rather have a regenerative valve than a valve that will fail in 5 to 10 or 15 years. That's simple. So I want to bring people on board. And right now at Core Matrix, where I'm the CEO, there's all kinds of skill sets that I still need. But when I make my strategy, I think about what can I do with the skill sets that I have first, and then what new resources do I have to go out and get, right? So as I'm executing, I don't want to have, not have that person on board and not be able to do anything, right? I think as a team, you can usually do something with what you got, and that's kind of laying the groundwork for when you can pull in that really important person. And so a lot of what you can do is actually what I've just been talking about. You can really crystallize your strategy, your strategic imperatives, nail those down in your strategic plan, which takes the form of a PowerPoint deck, maybe a written plan, and an Excel spreadsheet model. And that will answer a lot of questions. You have to go out and think about your customer. You have to go interview them. You have to try to represent that in your financials and in your business plan and in your presentation. So a lot of what you can do, you don't need a lot of people to do, right? And then when you don't have the answers, right, maybe that employee isn't your employee yet. Maybe they're just your advisor today. And you say, look, I don't have the money to hire you. I sure would dream to. And here's my dream. I like that dream too. But I need to get paid because I need to do this and this. Okay, well, why don't you come out as an advisor to me? I really need your skill set. Do you think I have this right? And you revisit your strategic plan with them, and they can help you push it along. That's what you do at the early stage. You kind of cobble things together, and you get there more slowly, yes, but you keep on showing people progress. Remember when I talked about these, milestones that we were going to accomplish as a company? Well, guess what? Of the 12 that we laid out, we got 8 of them done. Oh, wow, great example. So team members who can't join now, you can keep on sharing those examples and keep on getting their advice. And eventually, as you get investors and more resources, you can bring them in. Okay. So here's the Axogen example. So when I first arrived here in Gainesville, I was consulting to the EDA grant actually at OTL. And I said, my dream is to start a company, and I've got some rules that I want to kind of look for. Well, this technology license agreement or technology came along and eventually became a technology licensing agreement with me and my partner, Jamie. So this is actually the disclosure for that. And this is all the people at OTL signing it when I went off to do this. And so it's really fun. This was way back in 2002. And what we had then is an enzyme, right, that degraded a little proteoglycan that inhibited the growth cone of an axon. Seems pretty techy, right? But it was also really simple. Your body does this when it tries to regenerate your nerve naturally. This was trying to mimic the body's process in a technology that was patentable. It was really, really appealing to me because I started thinking about how we could regenerate nerves. The question was, how would we use it? And our initial thought was we'd use it as a drug that we'd inject in someone right at their nerve injury, and it would help the growth cones of those axons get through the scar and get down the rest of the tube and regenerate. Well, it turned out doing a drug was really complex for a lot of reasons, and we spent a lot of time, and we couldn't get that done. But what we came up with is we kind of studied and knew what these axons looked like. We knew how they worked. We knew how they regenerated more effectively with our technology. So we said, wait a second, maybe we could use this in a nerve graft. So the product that we ended up conceptualizing actually used the enzyme technology in the nerve graft. And at the time, we called that the advanced nerve graft. And this technology was cool. We used it in rats. That's actually the nerve model. And it worked extremely well. But we had another question, right? So we kind of got the money together to get those studies done, and we got the answer we thought, and then some. It really worked well. And we kind of came up with some other technologies. You see those here, AxoGuard, connector, and protector. But there was a big question that lay over us, and that is there enough nerve repair to support a company? That was a big question. So we really dug into that. So we thought a lot about the market and our customers. And so I wanted to share this module, less about strategy, more about market and customers. So what do we do to try to answer, well, is there a market for nerve repair? Most investors told us there wasn't. In fact, there weren't any companies that were actually doing nerve repair. There was no single company that said, oh, all we do is nerve repair. And yet we thought the market was huge. So we kind of put these numbers together. 28 million people experience trauma, and a little percentage of them, right, have major trauma to peripheral nerves. But that little percentage is a lot, right? It's 700,000 injuries to peripheral nerves every year. And a lot of them could be treated with surgery. And we came to this stuff by papers, by academic stuff, by going out and interviewing surgeons, kind of corroborating all this stuff. And we said, okay, and then some chunk of them could receive a graft of that nerve, and some others could get some kind of surgical aid. So we said we have almost 200,000 opportunities to do a nerve graft. This was way back then, and 250,000 opportunities to provide a surgical aid. This looks like a massive market. And this was clear as day to us. The more we dug in on this, the more we realized we had it. We had a really great market. But you know what? Just because we knew it, nobody else believed this. This actually became one of the biggest obstacles at Axogen, getting people to understand how big this market opportunity was. Most people said it wasn't this big, because if it was, there'd be all these big companies doing it. That kind of circular logic actually is really defeating. How do you overcome that when you're trying to get investors on board? You do it by appealing to a lot of them, and some one of them will get it. And that's kind of the process. And then we started, well, let's keep on digging in on this, right? So we really went kind of ballistic on how much work we did as far as understanding our customers. So I told you we had plastic reconstructive surgeons, orthopedic hand surgeons. We had them operating in different hospitals. We dug in all that stuff. We figured out where they were, who they were, how many of the accounts they were in. And then we actually boiled it down. This is actually a guy who's a supporter of the University of Florida actually helped me with it. He said, how long does it take you to convert one surgeon? And I was like, and I didn't know quite how to answer it. So I dug in on this and answered this question, right? Well, first I had to know, well, what is one surgeon worth? So I look at all the market for surgeons. We really dug in and said, okay, there's all these opportunities to do a graft. That means of all the surgeons that are out there, the average surgeon could do this many per month. And that became a really important metric to have at Axogen, because we lived this metric, right? We said there's 7 opportunities to do some type of our product with our nerve surgeons every month on an average surgeon. If we know that's true, what are we getting with our surgeon, right? We can measure that and monitor it, and then try to go after what we're missing. That became what Axogen did, rinse and repeat for years and years, just to try to figure out why we weren't getting more cases. and we got more and more and more of them. We did it for different types of our customers. We did it for different types of accounts. We did it with a top-down analysis and a bottoms-up analysis, which is a survey of our customers. That's the bottoms-up. Top-down was looking at papers and injury statistics and so on. And then we boiled it into what is it worth, right, to be in those accounts? What is a surgeon worth? And so all this stuff kind of led us to, well, how do we get a sales rep motivated, right? And how many good customers can a sales rep handle and so on? And then we can track it, right? We can see, this was way back in the ancient days for Axogen. We had a little tiny team. We had 3 direct salespeople, and we looked at their top accounts and some other accounts. And we said, okay, if there were 7 opportunities, what are we actually getting? And we could measure that. And so even our best surgeons were not getting that why. And over time, we supported these surgeons, right? We were in their accounts. We have a sales rep now, started out with 2 or 3, and then it became 100 over time. But we supported them with data, and we started churning out paper after paper on what was happening with our nerve repairs and with other nerve repairs. One of these was Rangers. This was one of our big contributions to nerve repair, actually, right? And this is maybe for some of you who are more academically minded, we generated, I don't know what the number was, when I left, it was something like 90 independent papers. We generated a ton of research. We figured out, like, we contributed to the science too, about the importance of basal lamina tubes and nerve repair, right? This is a really techie thing, but because Axogen existed, we solved a really big mystery in nerve regeneration. And but also this served a really important role for our customers, because we supported each one of those customers with data so that they could confidently use our products and know when they would work and when they would not work. And we were super open and honest with them about that. That led to what started as really small revenue. When we were only doing, $200,000 in revenue, nobody cared if we grew at 40%. But when that number got bigger and bigger, and we still grew at 40%, now the whole world was watching. So we went from a little tiny market cap of almost nothing to eventually, we raised some venture capital money, and we eventually uplisted to NASDAQ. And as the numbers got bigger and the growth continued, so too, things got crazy on the downside. When we're a small company, we couldn't believe how cheaply people wanted to value our company, but we saw it flip the other way, and got crazy on the big side, that our market cap went up and up and up as we started delivering. But we did it by really knowing our customer, getting down to a granular level about what kind of opportunities to solve the problems of that customer every month there were, and why we weren't meeting their needs, right? If we weren't getting all those opportunities, why? And a lot of it came down to proving to them that we could do what we said we could do, and we proved that through data.
John, do you have a second for a quick question?
Yeah.
How do you look for potential investors for an innovative idea?
Yeah, so it starts again with starting out with your dream, because your dream is what's going to motivate that investor. And you're going to share that dream with your team, right? And your team's going to have a collective dream, and that's going to become the reason that your company exists. So you're going to change something. That should be compelling to any investor. I love, thinking about investing in some technology companies, because I just think of the possibilities for how great an impact they could have, right? So that's what motivates me. Other investors have other motivations. But I know that if the team can deliver on the performance and make that dream a reality, it will also create a really nice company. So one of the dreams at Axogen was to do this, like this child here. He was the first of our really long nerve grafts and the first connector patient we had. So we had this little connecting aid. He had been run over by an ATV that he was driving. And it basically, he had no function in his arm, and they rebuilt his ulnar nerve, and they did it with these first uses of our product. And we were all so careful and nervous, but there was no other option for this kid. Well, it turned out he got full function back. It was just such an exhilarating moment. We all watched him every few months as he got his results coming in. And he became, for me, one of the most emotional patients that we had. I was in that case supporting the surgeon. And there's many others. sciatic nerve sniper injury. This actually ended up in the Wall Street Journal, so we accomplished one of our dreams. But to go back to the question about how do you get investors interested, you make sure your dream is compelling, right? And you make sure that you're unified, and then you can present that dream in a really simple way. And when they start asking you questions about, yeah, but can you really do that? You have answers. You know about your customer. They ask you 15 questions about your customer. You could go on for days about your customer. You know much more than your investor does about the customer.
John, the question continues, but not everyone is an investor. Where do you look for them?
Where do you find them? You know, take for example, if you're an early stage venture, there's something called Resi, which I just did the other day, excuse me. And so there, it's a diverse group of people who support early stage technology ventures, Resi. So that would be one example. You put your pitch deck together, you set up meetings. BioFlorida you can go to the BioFlorida conference. You can go to an early stage technology investment conference. You can provide your pitch deck to angel groups. You can find the groups that are relevant to you. So they're out there. You can go find them, and then you get in front of them and you hear what questions they ask, and you thank them for those questions. You don't get defensive. You answer them right away. And if you don't have the answers, you go back and try to dig them up. I get questions all the time. Even now, I've been presenting Core Matrix for 2 years. And I say, wow, that's a really great question. And I thank them for that. I say, I don't know the answer to it. I don't try to hide if I don't know. But typically I don't get those questions, to be honest. I've done a lot of homework now, and I've been around the block and how I answer those questions for folks. So part of it is just getting that experience for yourself too. And you start by doing the work, by putting your vision together, your strategy, your strategic imperatives, your tactics. Do that with a PowerPoint presentation and a business plan, answering all the big questions, and then you put that into an Excel model. If you start there, right, you're going to answer a lot of the big ones, and then you're ready to go talk to these investors. But you actually don't talk about any of that stuff with them, right? You first start with the dream is to help this child, right? That's how you start your pitch. This child has a severe nerve injury. How can we change this child's reality? And that's something that engages people. For me, I start with that picture of the child on the cover that I showed you of Core Matrix. I say, look, this valve was born from pediatric surgeons who are trying to treat congenital birth anomalies. These kids would die without a solution, or they'd have 4 or 5 surgeries in their lifetime. Each one of those surgeries are problematic. We can regenerate that child's heart, and we've done it, right? Wow, people are listening, right? I say, that's why I'm here, right? That's why I took this job as a CEO. Now everyone's sort of paying attention. The next question might be a critical one, right? But you're ready, right? You've got the vision. You say, look, believe me, and here's why. And then you go on and answer all the technical stuff. I wanted to move on to the next example. So this is kind of the action example, right? We got to our castle on the hill. We accomplished a lot of our dreams. A lot of the headlines that we laid out for ourselves, like being a NASDAQ traded company, we made. Long time ago, we passed our 10,000th patient. So a lot of the dreams that we laid out for the company, we've accomplished, right? It feels really good. So I want to get to investors because we just had a bunch of questions about that. I think a big part of what you want to do right now, if you're starting your company, is know what is your investor, right? What kind of type investor are you going to appeal to? And I want to just talk a little bit about the investment side of this. This is mostly for a technology company, right? That's a technology that someone's going to invest in that you need to spend considerable resources to develop. Not all companies need venture capital money, right? Or angel investor money. And I want to help you think about, is your venture something that you should go after this kind of money for? So one is just kind of look at the cost of capital. This is something they teach in business school, right? But we oftentimes don't think about it, but it's really, really important. And this is for, a small biotech company. A private biotech company has a really, really high cost of capital. So that means for every dollar that they take, they have to give a return to their investors. That's what? Well, it has to justify that investor giving them the dollar and justify the risk that that investor is going to take on. So this is a hard concept, right? But you can kind of try to quantify that. with looking at all the other companies and how many of them failed. And people do this all the time. Finance people do it all the time, right? So they try to come up with what should the cost of capital be for these ventures? Well, venture money, venture capital investment in your company, right? That's an institutional fund that may invest $1 million or $10 million or $20 million into your company that gives you kind of the opportunity to go after your dream, right? But beware, when you take $1, a really simple metric is you're going to have to double it every year until you return it. That's venture capital investing, right? They want a massive investment. It's not quite doubled every year, but it's up there. They want a massive return on their investment. Why? Because most fail. So you have to look like something that could return a lot of money to this investor. And so if they're looking for sort of a 40-50% return on their money, how do you do that? Well, if you take $1 of their money and they're looking for 50%, now they don't really think this way, but this is the rational way to think about it for yourself. If you keep that money for 5 years and you get an exit for them, right? You sell your company or you go public on NASDAQ, or you have so much profit you can pay them back, which almost never happens for a startup company. How long will it take you to pay them back, right? And what kind of return should you be thinking about for them to make you a good return for an investor? And so if it took you 5 years and they're looking for a 50% return, look at this little chart down below. If your exit year is 5 years out, you have to have a 5x. Well, you'd actually only be average for what they're looking for, right? You're going to get about a 40% return, not a 50% return. That's sort of a simple way to think about taking that money. How many times do I have to double it before I give it back? Well, kind of depends on the year that you get the exit. So how many companies can take $10 million, right? And every year double that money till they give it back? Are you one of those companies? That's what you have to ask yourself. If you're not, then you're not looking at venture capital investing. If you are, you better make that super clear, right? How are you going to deliver that kind of value down the road? So take Core Matrix, right? We've got a heart valve. This will be the first tricuspid valve, the first regenerative heart valve. It's in a $3 billion market. Most venture investors want to hear that you have at least $1 billion opportunity. So that's how you do it. Say, well, hey, we're going to not only be in tricuspid valve, but down the road we can be other places too. We can be the regenerative heart valve company, and in that way, people can see what those big heart valve companies are valued at, and they can see that yes, you could be one of those, right? If all these things came true, you could be one that became a $1 billion company. But it may be that you decide you're not that company, in which case you need to look for different types of money, right? Maybe you're going to take on debt, and that debt pays 8%. And so as long as you pay that 8% back at some point, you're good. So there's different types of investment, and it's not always angel / venture investment that you're looking for. There's different types of investors. You have to understand what they are looking for too. Let's say a venture investor may have very different needs if they're a big venture fund versus a small venture fund. And you really have to get in and understand those differences. So who knows these answers? You have people here, OTL knows these answers, investment bankers that you can hire. You can hire people who find money for you and they take a fee for that. You can ask people who are currently investing in your entity. They're probably networked. You can ask your advisors and your board members, and then you can just buy data resources to get you access to some of these. So that's a little bit about the investors, and they're looking for pretty much the same thing. They're really looking first at your team. Of course, they're looking at your technology and you're selling them on your dream. But if you don't fit the bill, right, and you have all these weaknesses that you're not being honest with them about, they're not going to invest in you, right? So knowing yourself and knowing your team and presenting that in a very thorough and compelling way will help appeal to an investor. So you want to be experienced, ethical. You want to be open. You want to really understand the things that I went through just now. You want to make sure that your plan is based on reality and that you course correct, and that you share that course correction with those that didn't invest but may invest in the future. And you want to make sure that you're positioned in a big market, that you can generate significant revenues. You have a really realistic way of getting there, and you can maybe do it with strategic partners that help you get there and protect it with strong IP. So my last example is Andante. So Andante is an invention here at the University of Florida. There's 4 of us that license this technology or that actually have an option on this technology. There's a brand new company, and it's pretty cool. So I'll kind of take you through it. So Andante is an antibody, right? And this antibody actually goes after the little brain signal for stress itself. Kind of wild, right? So on a very simple level, it meets my standard. Everybody can understand stress and how they feel about stress. Did you ever know an antibody could prevent the brain from sending a stress signal? That's just amazing. So on the face of it, it's kind of cool. And I think a lot of people get bought up into the story based on that, and I sure did. So what is this thing? Well, it actually is a little peptide that comes out of the brain. It hits the pituitary gland, which hits the adrenal glands, right? And so you have different releases from the body, including cortisol, that end up affecting your stress response. That's kind of it on a really simple level. And so why do we care about this? Well, over time, if we have maladaptive stress, we all know that if we kind of feel unhealthy when we're very stressed for a long period of time. But in fact, biologically, we're unhealthy too. And if this goes on for years, that's when disease and dysfunction can kick in. So if we can modulate that stress by modulating the stress response, we can actually change disease profiles really dramatically. We can do that in an acute setting and in a chronic setting. That's a pretty compelling call to action, right? Modulate stress. So why did I have this in the Know Thy Investor section? Well, this is a really big idea, right? And this is so we're kind of beaming in on the big idea, the cool technology level. And as a team, we had certain assets, this 4 of us that started the company. We all were bought in on this really simple concept of this is an invention of Todd Goldie, who ran the McKnight Brain Center here at UF and now is at Emory. So he got us psyched and focused on this. And then we all started thinking about ways we could use it. And I think the test for Andante will be just that. How do we've kind of bootstrapped this. We've got grants together to get us down the road. And then we've got some small investors who come in and supported us. And we're going to need at some point the big investor. And how do we do that? Well, we think about our indications. And so we think about the things that are super, super clear about our technology. And we looked at 200 of them. One of the bigger ones out there, and just a simple one for me to review here, is when we get stressed, more of us who are stressed also become obese. Obesity and stress go hand in hand. And in fact, people who have CRF, this stress signal, that if you add more, obese people have a bigger stress response. And in fact, if you reduce that stress signal, it actually has a big impact on obesity as well. And we've tested this now in a lot of our different models. We have all kinds of models. They're all turning out very well, but it's pretty wild. You get a really stressed mouse or rat, and they become obese in this stressed environment. They lose muscle mass. And if you intervene in that stress response, right, you can change the course of how that stress affects the mouse or the rat, and it has a big impact that we can measure. So they lose obesity in a dramatic way. They actually gain lean mass as a percentage of their body mass. So we don't have them lose muscle mass, and we can do this on the order of what one of the big anti-obesity, anti-diabetes drugs that's been talked about today is doing. So this is a pretty dramatic call to action. But in this environment, right, with the kind of funding environment that we're seeing, that you guys all have been interacting in, I'm sure if you've been doing this, it's really hard to raise money for any kind of venture. So you have to really think about all the things that you're going to do to get this antibody, in our case, this product, this technology down the road. So we kind of laid them out here in a really simple slide. And we said, these are all the things that we have to do to get this product to market. Here's all the things we've already done. Guys, thanks for listening to our story. Last time we saw you, we didn't have one of these check marks. Today we do. Here's the things that we're doing now. And here's the things that we're going to do in the future, right? So we lay out a roadmap for everybody to understand, but also very importantly, that we agree on, right? Every time we get together and talk about it, which we do all the time, we look at this roadmap and we think about this roadmap and what we've done, what we haven't done. And then we lay that out in a way that allows us to think about how we could eventually have a product. And we get really creative. Of the 200 different uses for this antibody, we think about some really specific ones that we can develop. And we develop those and we lay out markers for once we get that investment dollars, here's exactly what we're going to do for you. And we make that super crystal clear. And then we actually even say, look, once we get some of these milestones done, the first thing we're going to do is add value for you as an investor. We're going to be in humans and we're going to be doing it in a way that validates this whole approach, right? We're going to do our phase 1 study. So not to get into all the details, but we're going to do a phase 1 study that validates everything we've said about this antibody in ways that also validates many of these 200 indications that we could go after. So we want to be, what we're doing as a team is we're trying to be savvy and we're trying to make a compelling case to an investor that we have the answers. And if you could just fund this next phase, look at what could happen, right? And we'll have the answer, right? So we want to take away all the rest of the risk for them, make it really simple. If these are the things we must do, how much can we do with little or no money as a team? What things can't we do that we need their money for? And then how do we take out all the rest of the risk so that the only thing their money is going to is removing that risk? And so most investors want to think of their risk as a really simple thing. At Core Matrix, the heart company, right? It's a pivotal study for our heart valve. Once it's finished, they have the answer, right? If we get a yes, which we think we will, and we're not blinded to the data, so we can show them the data and they get really excited about it, we'll have an improved heart valve on the market. Now that is a clear call to action. For Andante, right, we have an antibody that could do one of 200 things, right? And we think we have maybe 3 or 4 things we'll do first with this antibody. But our development path allows us to actually keep all of them as options. And then we have a really specific option in front of our investor that we're going to present to that investor to say, here's what we're going to do in the next 6 months to remove the risk for you. So that's the Andante example. And so I would just end there real quick on Andante. Anyone have any questions for me on that?
John, I had a question.
Huh?
So you talked about making customers part of your company when you talked about Oxygen. And so in this instance, we're talking about Andante, which is a completely, it's a therapeutics company. How did you get that customer involvement and input? And how did you come up with the 3 or 4 things out of the 100 that you had, that you were looking at?
Yeah, I mean, part of that is iterative, and I can't say we have the full answers to that right now, but we think we have the answers now. So I want to be careful to say, while we think we know, we're also always open to that changing. But part of what we did is we engaged the customers here. You could think of as almost like the development apparatus that you need to develop an antibody. So they're part of our customer here that we're trying to appeal to almost is the investor. But also it's going to be the payer. So if you start with the payer down the road and you think about, well, what successful drugs are there? How do they get paid for? And who's buying them and making which purchase decisions? You can look at maybe the small universe of things that have been approved for a certain indication and start getting some feel for how they did it. Or you can look at the things that were very unsuccessful in the same exact indication that you thought you would go after. And then you present, so let's take, for example, something that we're not doing. There's been some drug launches to help women right after pregnancy deal with stress, right? And it was a really compelling drug that actually fell flat on its face. Why, right? And as soon as that happens, you know a lot about how people are going to react if you present a similar path to them, right? They're going to say, wait a second, just had this massive failure happen with this other drug that looked as good as yours, or maybe a little bit worse, but why would we do this? So it has nothing to do with you, right? And in fact, you might be right, but your customers in this case, no one paid for it, no one asked for it. They seem to have something majorly wrong in delivering that product to the end user. And if you kind of back it from there down to your needs today, you can say that's probably going to be a tough indication for me to get through, right? Obesity is another really tough one. So it's an example that's simple to use, but obesity is a very, very tough indication. So usually what people are looking for is a really specific indication in the case of an antibody that only your antibody can help, and that no one else has the rights to. That if you prove that you can be done in that indication safely, guess what? You can start applying that same antibody in other indications or a slightly different antibody. So that's kind of the game that we're after. And so our customer is a little different here. But, you know, in the drug development business or the antibody development business, what's nice is there's a really well-trod path that many, many people can help you with, right? There's big service providers. This is all they do. So you have a lot of resources that you can draw upon. And if you can get most of them sort of nodding to your indication, that's really a lot of the battle at this early stage, because the development pathway is super clear. Everybody knows what it is. It's getting most people to agree, even the experts in that area, to agree that they would really want this product, should you be able to successfully get it to market. And if you can do that, actually, you're going to get funders for it. You can be that bold about it, right? Does that answer the question?
John, another quick question. How does the antibody preclinical result compare to the FDA-approved GLP-1 agonists?
Yeah, so that's one of them out there. And that's a great example, right? The GLP-1 agonists do have some major drawbacks for patients, right? In their daily acceptance of those therapies. They have nausea and other problems. And then they don't actually fundamentally change the disease that underlies what their drug is trying to treat. So we think we could have some disease modification in our approach, because we're actually changing the stress response in a way that's healthy and safe. But also we don't have, we think, right, a lot of the drawbacks that this drug might have. And of course, those are things we can guess about and hypothesize about right now, since we're not in humans. Okay, I want to get onto these last few examples of something that's kind of fun, just a good way to end this. So I show you here a picture. I say, know thy stage in market, right? By market, I mean stock market in this case. This is a picture of the stock market during early Oxygen days. And, you know, so you see the stock market going down, you see that big crash in the middle of the chart there. That's 2008, 2009. And then it goes back up again, right? So what the heck does Oxygen have to do with the market? Nothing, right? Here we are, we're developing a nerve repair product. We're a little tiny company. The market has nothing to do with us, or does it, right? So the next chart, of course, you see that it does. If you were to plot, which I did, our valuation over the top of this market, this is Oxygen's valuation way back then, and you'd see that it exactly mirrored the market. And so we did all kinds of things to raise money. We did it in many different forms and fashions. We did venture rounds, we did debt rounds. But some of our troubles were seemingly things that are only to do with us. But weirdly, when you overlay this on the market, it actually mirrors the market really, really well. And it continues to, actually. And if you were to ask us of most startup companies, I think you'd find this. So Silicon Valley Bank crash is a good example today, right? What does it have to do with me? Well, if there's no liquidity in this market, and all those companies that thought they couldn't get access to their cash to pay payroll start having to go to their investors at fire sale prices to raise money, it's going to impact you in a hurry, right? So that's what the market has to do with you. And then if everyone's getting exits and people are going public and everyone's happy, your valuations will follow and money flows freely. It's really as simple as that. So some of this, right, has nothing to do with you. So then that brings me to the last slide. Know thy castle on a hill. Your castle on the hill is kind of where I started this, right? If you've been successful in your venture, right, you have to define what that success is. And your success is your castle on the hill. So at Oxygen, I had achieved a lot of the things that I wanted to. Sorry, my battery's running out here. I achieved a lot of the things that I wanted to. And so I named early on what those castle on the hill things were. And then when I achieved them, I used them as road markers to say, okay, when do I say I've reached that point, right? And I think this is really important. So in what scenario do you say, okay, we did it. I'm going to take my victory lap. When do you leave a success? What is success, right? So that takes us back to the beginning of this presentation. Really know what your dreams are. If you can answer those dreams for yourself, then it's amazing how they can end up being answered by the world around you, and you end up finding your dreams come true. So I'd say, just to reiterate again, the other part of that is your dreams come true with the people that you're with, and that's what makes it fun. So for me, this process itself is really fun. And whenever I'm in a tough bind, right, I just remember that. I love this process, and I love these challenges, and I love doing it with people. So I'll just end there.
Thank you very much for an excellent presentation, John. I don't know if there are any other questions. I don't see any other questions in the chat, but there was one question earlier about non-dilutive funding and SBIRs. If you can address that before I talk about the
Yeah,
next.
of course. The best funding is the funding that's free. So if you can get non-dilutive funding, that's great. Also, you have to make sure that you know what goals you're going to achieve with that funding, and make sure, of course, it complies with the goals of the grant. Sometimes those conflict a little. But if you have nailed down what your objectives are as a person and as a team, you come up with your strategic plan, right? Doing those things that bring you, making those core directional choices that bring you to your hoped for future. Then the grant can be a really important part in paying for a step or an important milestone in your journey. So I think a grant is a really, really important tool. And on Dante, for instance, the grant could be used to help, say, humanize our antibody, instead of having to get venture money, which is really expensive to do that. Maybe there's a grant that wants to do that. So that's a good example. We had a lot of grants at Axogen. Any other questions?
I don't see any other questions.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you very much. It was a great presentation. Next month, we will have a physical science investor from OUP, Ajay Raisam, who will be talking about technology development and everything related to what investors look for in a physical science technology and company. So please join us then. You see that on the screen now. You can go to our website also. It'll be sent out to people, so you should be able to register. Bring your questions. It's a Q&A, so it's an opportunity to ask Ajay questions about your innovation. For more information, go to our website, UF Innovate. When John talked about OTL, it's UF Innovate. We used to be called OTL before, but we have expanded. And so thanks very much for joining us. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Anita.
Thank you. Great information.
Thank you, Joe.